We're back with more NBA coverage, and this one I'll be covering Game 3 of the Spurs and Knicks in the NBA Finals round of the 2025-2026 NBA playoff campaign. Coming into it, obviously, the series itself has been close. That hasn't even been the problem up to this point. You've gotten nothing but entertaining basketball, large double-digit lead comebacks, exciting plays, and great highlights all across the series up to this point from both teams. You aren't missing a beat when it comes to the quality basketball play from both sides. It's just that every single time we get down to the final 2 minutes, the Knicks always seemed to have the advantage in the first couple games. All the time. The Spurs enter with a brief lead, and then it just quickly evaporates because of very brutal mistakes, especially in Game 2. The way that went, oh man, you can imagine that haunted a lot of the Spurs players for at least a little bit. It was probably one of the only things they could think about for quite some time. Because the possession is in your hands, and you quite literally let it slip from your grasp. These are the kinds of things that can challenge a young team like the Spurs, putting the Knicks in, again, a great position. You're heading to the Garden for Game 3 with a whole lot of chaos going on already. On top of this packed-out fan base, you are in the driver's seat right now. You're playing with the lead. You've already stolen home court. So this Game 3 could be everything for you. And that is exactly what made it a sort of must-win for San Antonio. Of course, the odds of a team winning a series after being down 0-3, virtually non-existent, never been done in the NBA in its entire history, especially in a best-of-7 series. It's never happened. So if they wanted to avoid that danger, the Spurs were going to have to capitalize on a full 48 minutes of play. Through the first 46, you could argue that the Spurs have had the edge over the Knicks. But for whatever reason, whether it be exhaustion, whether it be a lack of experience, the Knicks just keep finding ways to win. Could they finally overcome that mantle in this game to get over the hump? Well, the answer to that would hinge on how well they were able to pace themselves in this game. After all, while the Spurs had been competitive in the first 46 minutes, at the same time, when you have to come back from multiple double-digit leads late in the ball game just to tie or just to take a short but impactful lead at that point of time, you don't have as much control of the game as you think. And the Knicks, in that way, being able to keep Wembanyama off the boards, being able to slow them down in transition time and time again, they had the advantage over anything San Antonio was trying to do. That's what built those large leads in the first place. Not allowing those to happen as frequently as they did in the first couple games could be very important. And right when you start off the game, they got into it. Of course, the lefty shots, the lefty matchup in Jalen Brunson and De'Aaron Fox did not go so well, although honestly they both had some strong takes to start out the game. But it would be the Spurs starting off on a 9-3 run, getting it to Wembanyama early and often in this game, while Stephon Castle also was just unfazed out of the gates. I keep saying it about him, that man is an absolute warrior of a player. And once he just puts his head down, somehow, some way, he's going to try to create some form of contact or he's going to score. It doesn't always go the best. It doesn't always end up being the most efficient thing. But sometimes that tunnel vision can truly drive this team into a completely different level. You have that kind of pressure being put on by a player of his skill set, and then you round it out with virtually what everybody else is doing, and it just makes things incredibly dangerous for the team having to guard up against them. So they had that 9-3 run to start out the game. And luckily for the Spurs, it just kept going. There was a brief response from the Knicks is Jalen Brunson would honestly have an efficient quarter, but the lead just kept swelling and swelling with Stephon Castle again continuing to handle much of the scoring duty early in this game. Getting to the line as well, going for 7 points in this first quarter. So you are already getting that from him, and you're getting a quarter from Wembanyama as well, where he started out essentially making his first 4 shots. Now, if you remember in game 2, he had only 4 shots or so at halftime. And that idea right there about just hitting first, striking first, that is exactly what the Spurs felt that they had to do. Now, of course, going back to the last series, as it was said multiple times, it is more so about how you finish the game overall. And that has been the struggles for the Spurs when it comes to this particular matchup against the Knicks so far. But when they've been able to strike first and strike hard against these teams in the playoffs, we've seen it in every series. They have beaten the brakes off of some of these teams by being able to get off to those quick starts. To the point where even if they do adjust somewhat properly, by that point, it's already too late in the game to really make that much of an influence on the court with what they're doing. So you get that already going down, and that's amazing. Not to mention as well, there are a few problems for the Knicks in this entire run. On the one hand, the league grew to 19-9 and they called timeout. But they were already sitting down Mikal Bridges. They were already sitting him down, which is kind of tough. It isn't even the first time they dealt with it this series. They had to do the same thing with Josh Hart the last game because he got in early foul trouble. But here you have Mikal Bridges pick up 2 early ones. Now again, a lot of that is accustomed to the pressure, but at the same time, the Knicks just seem to have a lack of discipline, at least in this early stretch. And so already you have one of your more important players, especially from the 3-and-D realm. You take away that matchup, and now they're able to just exploit that even further. It puts even more pressure on OG Anunoby as well, which may not have been a problem. He also had 6 points in the quarter, so that didn't end up being too big of a deal. But already you had to get deep into your bench and put in Landry Shamet, of all people. Now, somehow, someway, he did pick up a block, maybe more so a steal on Victor Wembanyama, but you ain't asking him to do that. You're asking him to go out there and shoot the lights out. That didn't happen immediately. It didn't happen. But at least the Knicks, in this substitution, they started to make some progress. And it was mainly due to Josh Hart, who has, by all accounts, and from what I've seen, from what I've witnessed, he has had probably one of the more unorthodox series in the playoffs that you'll ever see. Quite literally, an early shot that he had in this first quarter would end up being his first point in 5 quarters. Think about that. He hadn't scored a point in 5 quarters. He had 15 rebounds in game 1 and just 3 points. And I guess with that shot and everything else that followed, he just decided that, hey, this is going to be a game where I'm going to go off and start scoring crazy anyway, especially if they're going to keep leaving me open from 3. Did the same thing against the Cavs. And now it was time for him to enact some of that same pressure on this San Antonio defense, which he ended up doing successfully. You know, he was one of the main reasons why they were able to cut the lead down to 11, and he had himself an 8-point first quarter through all of it. Because again, you're going to keep on daring Josh Hart to shoot. I guess that's the approach that so many different teams have decided to go with at this time. Yet, when he makes you pay for them shits, it's demoralizing, and at some point you're going to have to step up, but teams are so damn prideful that they refuse to do so. So go crazy, Josh Hart. You know what I'm saying? Already outpaced his series total in points in the quarter, just to add another layer to it. But you're not complaining about that if you're New York. The threat can come from pretty much anywhere in the same way. And that's been a huge reason why the Knicks have been able to get to this point. You couldn't always say that in years past. You couldn't always say that in years past about this team, especially with their lack of bench depth. But now, with all these players' respective abilities, and with what these players can do off the bench, you combine all of that together. You combine how versatile these players tend to be, and it's like, damn, it's a perfect mesh of harmony. Damn near. That's why they got here. That's why they're riding a 13-game win streak now. That's not by accident. So, even with that being said, they had their work to do. They were down 33-22 at halftime. Well, at the end of the first quarter, my fault. Man, if they ever were thinking about a turn up at any point in this game, they got it. They got it in the second quarter. Of course, some semblance of that started with them going after Luke Trinet because, of course, in fact, Josh Hart literally picked up a technical foul after just bitching Luke Trinet completely and then having him shove Hart to the ground. That's how bad it already was. But that wasn't even the worst of it. In fact, you had everybody starting to get a bit of concentration and a bit of open looks in the second quarter. Everybody, quite frankly. Jose Alvarado was out here hitting drifting shots over Victor Wembanyama at times in this somehow. They were getting to the free throw line, putting more pressure on this Spurs defense to guard them inside, especially with Karl-Anthony Towns putting a bit more pressure on those switches, and the fact that they still have Victor Wembanyama roaming around, giving him smaller assignments to work with and taking great advantage of those time and time and time again. Jordan Clarkson came in his drunken basketball form, was actually somewhat efficient. For a while, he hadn't missed a shot, and one of these key ones here would cut the lead down to 7. In no time, the Knicks had started to do tremendous work all over the court in order to retake the lead back. And again, turnovers weren't really that much of an issue. Although on their side of things, I will say that some of the ones they picked up by the end were just incredibly sloppy and had no business taking place for a Knicks team that had done all this up to this point. But the main thing was that, one, this was an 11-3 run for the Knicks at this point of time, and two, well, they were already in the bonus. So again, putting that early pressure, being the aggressors, especially on the interior against this defense, and forcing them to be mistake prone. It started out a very great comeback attempt for the Knicks in this regard, especially after having such a low output in quarter number 1. And that all of that is before you even get to what the hell was happening with OG Anunoby. I mean, this man legitimately could not miss for a while. Could not miss. Whether it be him just playing that suffocating individual defense, especially inside the paint, or whether it be him continuing to, once again, for the second straight game in a row, body up Victor Wembanyama, put him in jail, and put up a drive-in dunk against him with 2 hands. The ability to make those shots, especially from the corners. I mean, my goodness. They weren't lying when they say that, hey, he loves to rely on that jump shot in the corner. No, they meant that shit. Because, dude, oh my gosh. Like, he legitimately could not miss from that range at all. So you just have that piling up in bunches after bunches. And this Knicks team slowly starts to get back within a 2 possession game now, with all that going down. Of course, there were a few mistakes every now and then, but they were able to survive the non-Brunson storm as well, as he would have to go out early. Foreshadowing. You always talk about the non-Wembanyama minutes, but Jalen Brunson is still that impactful of a player for this Knicks team, and to be honest, he had an actually efficient game this time around. So he was working pretty lethal. And knowing that you're taking that off the court, that can really lighten the mood and definitely push the tempo for an opposing lineup. Not necessarily in this case, because the Spurs just went flat out cold. Like they could not really do much of anything outside really of Stephon Castle. Victor Wembanyama briefly went cold from shooting. He'd missed like 3 consecutive shots in a row. But Stephon Castle kept him steady. I'm telling you, all across the board, whether it be with him, especially on the offensive end, hustling for those offensive rebounds and just getting his shot at will, this team still had a lead for majority of this quarter up until the 4-minute, 18-second mark. And Castle, by that point, had himself 11 points in just the second quarter alone. Was the leading scorer of the game with like 18 total. He was playing his ass off out there. Like, that is an incredible start for a player in Castle's position. And again, it was a lot easier for him in a way. Because, we'll get into more of that later. But with him being able to play off the ball to that level and make those snap decisions like that time and time again, it's just natural for him to do. Like, yes, he can be a pretty solid playmaker, but continuing to put the ball in his hands like that, he still isn't all there yet in that regard. He can learn it, but that's just not something that you're going to ask him to consistently do. Wembanyama was able to pick it up just a little bit in the final 4 minutes of the quarter, but they just had so many breakdowns on the defensive end, and I don't think that you can explain it a lot better than, honestly, some of the last few sequences. Like, for example, on one of the OG Anunoby threes, that came as a result of them losing the ball, the Knicks, and then getting it back on a bad pass, pushing it over to Anunoby on the wing, and having Carter Bryant, just for whatever reason, zoom right past them on a flyby, and that leads to an open three. Giving up an open three from deep range to Josh Hart once again, when there are people in the area that can guard him at that particular point of time. And same thing, another collapse with Jalen Brunson with 41 seconds to go, banging in an open three-pointer himself on another late rotation. They'd been playing fine defensively for most of the game, and yet in the second quarter, especially in those final 2 minutes of the second quarter, the Knicks just turned it up a notch completely. And it led to the Knicks having themselves a 64-57 advantage at halftime. So you're probably wondering how they got there in reality. They scored a finals record 42 points in the second quarter. At least for them in the finals, right? 42 points. And it wasn't even just the fact they had all those points. They also mentioned that they shot somewhere around greater than 70% from the field in that quarter. The same kind of efficiency that they've had for most of that 13-game winning streak in this playoff run. They got a vast amount of that in just one quarter of action against a Spurs defense that is known for their world-class defense. not necessarily the best picture painted here. Now, again, you can't question the urgency. It's there. But you have got to be able to execute. And you've got to be able to weather the storm in a situation like this. It's game 3. You can't even allow something like this to get past you. So, hey, it wasn't the craziest of, deficits. 7 points ain't that much, but to, come from a lead to that, it's like, okay, dial it back. Let's adjust. Let's attack this the proper way. Because even with this going down, there's still enough time to where it's like, hey, as long as you establish something consistent, you can do what you need to do to win the game. But you can't let another run like that happen. That's unacceptable. So that is just high energy, high paced offense from the Knicks, regaining it a little bit after losing it. And especially when I make the point about the pacing, the Knicks did a great job of slowing them down in transition. It's not to say that the Spurs lacked those opportunities to barrel to the rim past a defense that wasn't set. They had several chances to do so on runouts. And yet every single time, the Knicks got back and got their defense set. In the same breath, the Knicks, although they didn't have to rely on it all the time, they were able to take advantage of that just a little bit more. Meaning that at halftime, the Knicks had like 9 points in the fast break, and the Spurs had 0. Not something you'd ever expect from this San Antonio team as constructed. 0? Even if you're being stopped in transition on a few occasions, nothing in the fast break. Or the way this team wants to play, oh hell no. Turn that shit right around in the second half. Because that's going to be one of the main ways you facilitate controlling the pace and the flow of the game. That is the key right there. Even if it wasn't that big of a deal, it's like, are we being serious, bro? And this is where I say the third quarter can always be pivotal for these teams. The Spurs in particular, they did a great job of responding. Now, of course, things were still not easy. Who said they were going to be easy for the Spurs team, right? But quite literally, the Knicks on back-to-back possessions got a poor pass from Karl-Anthony Towns out of the post to where he overthrows Jalen Brunson. No need to be tossing it that high for a man in Jalen Brunson who's just like 6'2". And then also a bad closeout from Jalen Brunson leading to a flagrant 1 penalty foul. On back-to-back possessions to bring them right back within a point. Both of them involving Julian Champagnie as well, accounting for an early run of sorts, just to trim that lead all the way back down. Automatically, you've given the Spurs the fire that they need to start coming back in this game. And it just was not a great sign for the Knicks at all. It continued, in fact, and they had themselves a 10-4 run, the Spurs did, by the time it was all said and done, to just get back within 1 once again of the game. Everybody was getting aggressive, and the Spurs, with that in mind, like, they just continued to capitalize on some errant passes. Because, yes, whenever you see Victor Wembanyama in the paint, you're going to run like a scared little man. That's what you're going to do. I don't know what pass that Jalen Brunson thought he had here, but he quite literally gets trapped by those two. Victor Wembanyama in the area, of course, and for some reason he decides to scoot a pass behind his back, and it just gets easily swooped up by Wembanyama. One of the easiest steals he'd probably have as a player especially not inside the restricted area. And you just hand it to him on a silver platter, leading to a foul down the floor, and bada bing, bada boom, here we are. Bing bong, indeed. I don't know who the hell still says that. Maybe a lot of New Yorkers do. Whatever. Fine. The defense started to tighten up a little bit better overall. And granted, with the hot starts that these teams had in the first and then the second quarter, they kind of had to. So, by all means, nothing was given from these teams. You just had to go out there and take it. Jalen Brunson was still doing so. Wembanyama was still doing so. And that was a great sign to see for both of those players. In fact, both of the teams for the majority of the game had been shooting anywhere in between like 47 to 50% from the field at any one given point of time. And Brunson and Wembanyama were large reasons of that. Seeing how inefficient they had been over the first couple games. Maybe not Wembanyama in game 2. But here we are in game 3 with both of them shooting lights out. And both of them on pace for crazy outputs to this point in the game. That's how you knew you were getting all the competition that you wanted in this one. However, despite that going down, despite the scoring prowess that these players had, it all came down to them being available to play. And still, we were at a point where you had to find a way to manage your foul trouble if you were New York. Mikal Bridges still had not seen the floor all that much since the first quarter, but to play in bunches as a result of his foul trouble. And now, in the third quarter, with 6 minutes or so left, with Jalen Brunson playing like this, at least from the scoring standpoint, he already had 4 fouls. Y'all don't even want to remember the amount of times that something like that happened in the playoffs in 2025 that led to the Knicks eventually losing that series to the Pacers. How many times did they take advantage of his defensive, just habits and lack of true prowess there to bait him into fouls and get him in early foul trouble to then blitz the living hell out of the Knicks in non-Brunson minutes and ultimately win the series? And the Spurs have had the mentality of going after Brunson and Towns when they can and often. And it seemed like this was the perfect opportunity for them to test, hey, how could they do it? Because neither team was playing their superstar, I should say. You also have Wembanyama sitting this down at this time. So I literally asked, who's going to take control of the game here if you don't have either of those guys on the floor? At least for the last few minutes or so. Wembanyama was still in, and again, man was going crazy, pulling up from deep, taking advantage of the big lineups, because even with these players lining up against them, being 7 foot tall, they just do not have the speed. They do not have the coordination that Wembanyama has. Again, you're not going to find that many players who are that fucking tall moving the way he does on a basketball court. It's just not going to happen. You could craft that shit in a lab, and chances are he will still not come up with it. But they sub him out with a 3-point lead, and so it's really all just about, well, not a 3-point lead, but rather a 2-point lead after Dylan Harper got to the line. So here we are now, again, with them potentially slipping in their production, but still having enough of a cushion to, live with what's going on there. I tell you, bro, I don't know what the hell it was with Jordan Clarkson in this game. That man has some fucking superpowers or some shit, bro. Getting his own board and still finding a way to put up a circus shot off the glass to cut the lead back down to 1. Like, he'd still been highly efficient in this game, and he was being aggressive on the defensive glass, too. I never expected that shit from Jordan Clarkson. Matter of fact, how ironic is this? Because I don't think they'd have to. I don't think that they'd had to play Jordan Clarkson all that much in the first couple games. Do you understand that with Jordan Clarkson playing in this game, to highlight that effort from him in this, and also just dial it back for a second? Because if you are a Jazz fan, ask yourself, how the fuck did Jordan Clarkson make an NBA Finals before Donovan Mitchell? Before Rudy Gobert? How the fuck did that happen? How did that happen? Could be a rhetorical question. Just do with that information what you will. Because there is no shot. There is no way that we can even take that seriously. Donovan Mitchell had to wait all that time just to get to a conference finals for the first time this fucking year. And it is Jordan Clarkson in the NBA Finals before either of those two. Okay. Even if he isn't playing a large role in them being there, that is just such a slap in the fucking face. And I find that pretty ironic. Like, you can't make that shit up, man. Oh, man. Moving on from there, the Knicks were still trying to stay in it. And they're still trying to. They had Bridges back in at this point, so again, sparingly playing him his minutes, but still trying to make an impact. You had to find a way to make that balance work out, especially late in this kind of ballgame. But the Knicks, even with the Spurs hitting a few of those key shots, getting Julian Champagnie to knock down yet another three-pointer in this game, finally trying to do some great work in the second half, compared to just only being present for the first this time. He still had his own gripes, despite the effort that he has shown on rebounding across this entire playoff run. Because you still had the Knicks come within 1 point of the game as Mikal Bridges would actually pull up and fire a massive mid-range shot to get themselves the 92-91 deficit by the end of the third quarter. It was still anyone's game, but the Spurs could say that they still had at least a lead heading into the fourth quarter. And that was a lot better than they could say for themselves when it came to trailing by 12, trailing by 14, especially later in the fourth quarter. They had themselves something that they could build upon. And again, that response to it would be everything in the context of how they could close this game out. Safe to say that this fourth quarter was a grit and grind special, baby. You want to talk about hard-nosed defense? You want to talk about the ability to run players off the line? You want to talk about just tough buckets after tough buckets? That was this fourth quarter, to be honest with you. And I mean, hey, we should have saw something like that coming with an earlier shot from Jalen Brunson. Like, I should have talked about it then, but this nigga literally was able to, in the third quarter, on a drive against De'Aaron Fox, he's not even looking at the rim. His head is away from the rim, and he just flips up a fucking shot like it's nothing for an and one on De'Aaron Fox. Looking away from the rim, body contorted away from the basket, and he still finds a way from that angle to get the shot over Fox's head and cash it in. In every single angle you could envision, in every single angle that you don't even think is possible for a player to hit from, Brunson's got him in his back. They were going to need that in this fourth quarter with the Spurs holding a brief lead here. But they would have to wait. Because again, key to that, you don't have Brunson playing right now. You're still going to sit him out. And granted, even if he wasn't in foul trouble, chances are he's probably not starting off the fourth quarter anyways. That's not typically what the Knicks do. But the entire scheme changed with Brunson not being out on the floor early. So the Knicks would have to overcompensate in a way, work extra hard just to play defense against this Spurs team and try to give themselves some possessions that are a bit easier to stomach, especially with not having that closing mentality out there for you. It was a bit of a struggle. Like, they just could not really handle the interior pressure that the Spurs were getting. Now, again, the defense was there. It was a very slow quarter indeed. And the points for the Spurs were spaced out. But they did have themselves a 7-0 run, well, a 6-0 run rather, to open the quarter. And then to open the fourth quarter, generally speaking. They had a few more free throws tacked onto it for them to ultimately come up with a 10-4 advantage in the entire thing by that point to open the fourth quarter at least, making things a bit disastrous there. Like, challenges were also key, I will say. Like, literally, there was a sequence in this fourth quarter, even with the Spurs holding the lead, where they just went challenge for challenge. I mean, in one such case, you have Wembanyama pull off a fucking step back from deep on Mitchell Robinson, and I'm like, call a foul, call a fucking foul, that's a foul. No, it wasn't. They ruled that Wembanyama pushed off before we even got to that point. As crazy as that shot was, it just didn't end up counting, but it would continue. It did continue. Because, hey, you had a foul on Keldon Johnson when it came to him matching up against Mitchell Robinson offensively. Kind of just holding on to him for dear life a little too much, and there you go. Then to make matters even worse, for another challenge at the 7-minute mark around, Karl-Anthony Towns was flagged for grabbing the living shit out of Victor Wembanyama. So 3 challenges just like that, meaning that majority of them that the teams could use for the game were already gobbled in just the span of a few seconds. Now, again, each one of them in their own way are important to the context of the game. And with all those calls in mind, when a game is this close, like, you want to make sure that you have it right. If you don't think that it's the right call, hey, you have them in your pocket. You can use them whenever. Now would be the time. And granted, that is exactly what happened. But it is just tough for the Knicks. Well, yeah, the Knicks would end up throughout this time using, if I'm not mistaken, the Spurs used both of theirs. And then again, the Knicks also were down to their last one. So that would also be something to think about heading into the final few minutes of the game. The Spurs were still trying to keep their feet on the gas pedal. Very much so. I mean, man, hey. I don't care how great of a sharpshooter he might be. But, dude, even with Jalen Brunson trying to work this team back into the game by himself almost, which honestly some people kind of had a problem with from what I've been seeing. Yes, the Knicks were playing all around basketball to get everybody their touches in the games prior, leading to wins, where even with Brunson taking hella shots, other players were still able to get theirs. And yes, this was another game where Brunson took a load of shots. Players outside of OG Anunoby were not hitting to the same extent. And Josh Hart again, it started off early for them, but it cooled down by that point in the fourth quarter. So quite literally, in ways, it was Jalen Brunson, it was OG Anunoby, or nothing in the fourth quarter. And while, people like to attribute that hero ball thing negatively, Jalen Brunson has also proven when he is out on the floor in clutch time that why would you not trust him in those situations, right? He's shown you time and time again what he can do. So, I'm not harping on that too much. But that can kind of take away the spirits for, your, effort to win in this game when it comes down to that. So I can see both sides. I'm not really harping on it too much. I just say that, hey, Landry Shamet should never be caught under a Victor Wembanyama alley-ooper. Should never happen. I don't know what the fuck they thought was going to happen when he rotated over there. As soon as they saw that, Wembanyama and this entire Spurs team were licking their fucking jobs. Are you fucking serious, bro? And that came off of Julian Champagnie as well, being able to play defense and once again bait Landry Shamet into an awkward position, leading to a foul that pushed the lead up to 8 for the Spurs. So the turnovers were again relatively quiet, but the Spurs did hold an advantage in turnovers forced. Again, a lot of these just are mindless from New York. We've known them to play much better and much more disciplined than this in the previous series. And the fact that this is going on now, with a chance for them to potentially go up 3-0, you're kind of like, oh man, now it's the time that y'all want to, you know what I'm saying? That's just not necessarily a great look. But they were still in the game. It was still within 8 points, so, you're not necessarily in disaster territory, but man, you gotta clean it up. Well, just a little bit. Same thing. Shamet is just going to keep trying to go at Wembanyama, and he did so, and he got just packed off the glass right into the outstretched arms of Stephon Castle on the defensive rebound. It was a block party in this fourth quarter, and when it came to the three-point shot for both teams, what three-point shot? I mean, I'm dead serious when I say that. Even in a game that was still within 6 points, you get all the way to the deeper end of clutch time and nearing the 2-minute mark. Jalen Brunson, in fact, had just bailed out this Knicks team after a sequence in which the Spurs literally blocked everything. They packed the shit out of Jalen Brunson. De'Aaron Fox packed the shit out of Karl Anthony Towns from behind on 2 back-to-back possessions. Who the fuck would have thought that De'Aaron Fox had that kind of defense in his bag? No one ever. And yet here he was doing that in one of the more pivotal games in this series. Completely. You got to win this if you're San Antonio. And you're out there playing like it. If that's the kind of hustle you're going to show, even when out of position, even when not having the same kind of height or weight disparity that Karl Anthony Towns possesses, you're still willing to leap into the fucking air like a madman and nab him from behind on consecutive times. And then you have Jalen Brunson just throw up a shot to beat the buzzer for the fuck of it and still make it. But quite literally, with every single shot that had been taken and made in this fourth quarter, none of them were three-pointers. In fact, the teams combined shot all of 15 from 3 before the 2-minute mark. All 15. Like I said, dead ball air basketball in its finest. You got them swatting shots all over the place. And then neither team can hit a three-pointer to save their life. Just the pure competitive angle here being utilized. But that doesn't mean that you miss out on converting these shots when the time comes. And luckily for Castle, they continue to dare him to shoot in this game. Multiple teams have across this entire playoff run. Like I've said time and time again, when they're doing so, you've got to be able to hit them. And in a late game scenario like this, up by 4, but still have the Knicks nipping at your butt, he hit a deep, and I mean a deep 3. Damn near from the logo. You're not expecting that from Stephon Castle, but nevertheless, that was such a clutch shot that the Spurs absolutely needed just to keep the pressure off of them. And yet still, even with Dylan Harper's hustle and the advantage on the score sheet, it was not enough because this team literally would just not go away. Jalen Brunson just pulling up from deep once again and hitting another crucial three-point shot to push the lead back down to 3. It's the mentality that both of these teams have. They just will not quit until that buzzer sounds, until we reach the triple digits, the triple zeros. It's not over, and no lead is safe. And it's just had to be so stressful for San Antonio fans in that moment because you have a lead. You're thinking that you're going to close out the game, and still you have to see Jalen Brunson doing all this shit on the other end. Now they did get the response because De'Aaron Fox, after still a very rough shooting game, he'd already made most of his impact as a facilitator, which again was a massive reason for them winning the Thunder series in the first place when he came back. Not necessarily because of his scoring. Yet when it came time for him to take that shot, to put it all on him, because I'm telling you, they guarded it perfectly. Wembanyama was at the top of the key, trying to get that handoff, and the whole time, football screen, driving Wembanyama away from the play is Karl-Anthony Towns. After a night where he also had not really done that well on the offensive end, but still defensively, in that moment, you're just thinking, deny Wembanyama. We don't need to give him the final shot of the game again, like we did in game 2, and potentially have him convert on this opportunity. We don't even want to see anything like that go down. Deny him the ball. That's exactly what they did. And it's smart. It's obvious. Put it on somebody, anybody else other than Wembanyama in that situation. And so Fox has to do something. He gets into the lane, pulls up for that signature mid-range shot, and cashes it in for one of the only buckets he'd had in the game entirely to put the lead back up to 5 and still give the Spurs just a little bit of breathing room here, at least for a brief second. Because literally in the next possession, you have OG Anunoby get in the corner, get smothered on the initial contest and stand up, hand in his face, and then the nigga just turns around and hits a corner shot from 3 again to cut the lead back down to 2. I'm like, no, oh my gosh, man, you can't make that shit up, man. No, bro, no. Come on. Just a lot of pressure, a lot on the line for both teams here. And it is literally coming down to the very end to see who can pull it off. Fortunately for the Spurs, they'd get the ball in bounds, and Stephon Castle got the hard part out of the way, made the first, made the second, and boom. The Knicks tried to go for threes, but the Spurs smartly did not foul. They didn't even make those shots, and as a result, the Spurs were able to get themselves a win. 115-111 in Game 3. They had to fight tooth and nail just to get it, but they got it. They avoid the potential 0-3 deficit because, again, it's not something that many teams come back from. But they got it the fuck done. That's all you can ask for at that point in time. And I mean, there's a lot to be made of it. On the one end, when you look at some of the metrics here, again, they were able to turn it around a little bit in the fast break. That isn't really the key for them. They forced 13 turnovers in this game and scored 21 off of them, compared to just 7 for the Knicks on 8 turnovers by the Spurs team in a 4-point ball game. Not to mention the way that they were moving the ball around. They detailed that they averaged like 19 assists per game in the 2 games prior, and it already outpaced that several times over early on, which is pretty wild when you think about it. They had 28 assists by the end of this game. So it wasn't just about, driving down the lane without a purpose. They were actually converting on some of the kick-out attempts that they nabbed as a result of it. They were spreading the ball around a little bit, allowing other people to get touches on this team. And it just spread out this Knicks defense enough to where, hey, they could always go back to those interior looks if they needed to. And they had the benefit of being able to drive it out whenever they wanted. Time and time again. That was the key for the Spurs. Things just started to open up for them in ways that hadn't happened in the previous games. And as a result, they took massive advantage of it. Had to in order to win this. The rebounds were also not necessarily the best. In terms of field goals, they shot slightly better than the Knicks by the end of it. But again, being able to do those things, and especially running in transition over the course of the game, especially in that second half, was the overall benefit the Spurs had in this game. Plus, Wembanyama's aggression. After missing a game-winning shot potentially, and also having that turnover, multiple people were asking themselves, how exactly is he going to respond? Is playing in the Garden to this level and this situation going to make him even more uncomfortable than he already has been, and frankly nervous in the first couple games? Is that pressure going to seep in and truly hinder his ability to do much of anything on the court? How exactly is he going to respond after that sequence? You just went out there and you saw him early on take those shots, whether or not he was hitting them. The damn near double-digit attempts or 15-plus point halves in the Thunder series led to pretty much all 4 of the wins that the Spurs logged up. And once again, with him having 14 points or something like that in the first half, while also being that efficient from the field, it was a deadly combination that by the time it got going, the Knicks didn't really have a way of stopping all that much. They could only hope to contain it, and it just did not happen, as he would have himself a game with 32 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals, and 3 blocks. Just a single turnover as well, on 11 of 18 shooting. When you can have literally the largest player in the NBA still find ways to involve other players on the court, even if there were still some complaints as I'm watching the game. I'm like, I'm just listening, I'm watching everything, I'm locked in, and here you have people still complaining about, hey, take the fucking 3-point shot. Take that fucking mid-range shot. You know who you are, Victor Wembanyama. I mean, you can make that shit. Take the fucking shot. 6 assists to 1 turnover for a player of that sort is pretty damn good. And again, you had that overall balance and aggression from Wembanyama. He's going to get his, but he's also willing to make sure that if the passes are there, he can get it to his other teammates. And so that all-around play was something that has been rare, generally speaking. He became the second youngest player with 30 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists in a finals game since Magic Johnson. And he also became the second Spur with at least 25 and 5. That only other one being Tim Duncan, because of course it was. Just a historical night in multiple ways to arrive in the Garden, as they so said. After all, he's a pretty cool dude. He's played chess in the city before. I'm sure the Knicks fans love him for that. Their minds can change quickly. We'll see what happens. Stephon Castle, on the other hand, though he cooled down a little bit in the second half, he was also just as important for what they were able to do. In ways, he, alongside Wembanyama, set the tone for exactly how this game was going to go. With his 23 points on 8 of 14 shooting with a pair of threes, along with 5 rebounds and assists and a block. That kind of pressure being established that early opened up the room for everything else the Spurs were able to do in this one. And they eventually got it done. With those contributions, Wembanyama and Castle also became the first pair of teammates 22 years old or younger to score at least 20 points in a finals game. With their backs against the wall, in a way, nonetheless. So again, while the inexperience element can be something to watch out for, at the same time, even with them being down 0-2 in this series, it doesn't seem like they particularly care about any of that when it comes to people still trying to discuss this as if it is a problem. When they can go out there in a hostile MSG crowd that is filled to the brim and pull this off. I just don't know how much more people would have to see. Dylan Harper did not have a really efficient game, but had 13 points and 9 rebounds and 4 assists as well. Julian Champagnie had 12 points and 3 threes. De'Aaron Fox also had 12 points and 8 assists on 4-14 shooting, which again, not the greatest, but he kept turnovers to a minimum in this game with only 2 and had those blocks as well. So that impact as well, along with him hitting the shot that he needed to, or quite literally, we could be talking about anything else in regards to New York right now. That ended up mattering, so gotta give him respect for that. Devin Vassell also had 11 points and 3 threes, although his rebounding was a lot slower and less impactful in this game, but that's okay. You know, the Spurs now enter Game 4, which will be later on tonight, at around the same time, with a win on the table. And as has been said before, 0-3 deficits are virtually impossible to come back through them, but not 0-2. We were all there when the Bucks came back from an 0-2 deficit against the Suns to win in 6 in 2021. Like, that has precedent. And they literally showed that before the game came on. Later on that night, on Monday. So, I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying that, the Knicks as well are probably thinking, moving on to them, that, hey, hold on just a second. Just hold on. Weather it down a little bit. Slow down. Because the worst thing you want to do is to have something like that swell up, especially with some of the habitual mistakes that they made in this game. The foul trouble from both Bridges and Brunson, the inexcusable turnovers, those are things that you do not want carrying over into a Game 4. You have to account for them, but you don't need to overcomplicate them either at the same time, because things can and will get out of hand if they do that. I can assure you that is the case. And so the Knicks will want to play that carefully by ear. Now, granted, they did have the advantage in fast break points, as we mentioned, And they also had the advantage in boards, getting 12 offensive rebounds to just the Spurs 6, and also at 46 overall rebounds. So they were still able to crash the glass and give themselves a lot of opportunities for second chance points. After a while, though, when it comes to making all those menial mistakes, like at a point you just don't overcome something like that. And that's exactly the situation the Knicks found themselves in. Jalen Brunson, as we mentioned, had 32 points on 11 of 25 shooting, along with 5 rebounds and assists. Now, his efficiency was tanked, though. He had the 1-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio with 5 turnovers and also had 5 fouls. In foul trouble for most of the game. That's what can happen when you do a poor job of hiding Jalen Brunson. And it made it even more easy for the Spurs to do it with some of the other 3-and-D players off, especially Mikal Bridges in this sense. Like, you get that off, that's another body to completely leave to the wayside as you put in Landry Shamet. And you can attack both of them. Landry Shamet got attacked multiple times, also had 5 fouls in 23 minutes of play. So, to a point, like, in some cases, you're not going to be able to stick with these Spurs players, and that's okay. But driving your own self out of the game by getting into that kind of foul trouble that consistently is a problem that the Knicks are going to have to figure out heading into the next game. Because they cannot allow that to happen again. And it wasn't even just Jalen Brunson. You had the dumb fouls kind of return for Karl-Anthony Towns, getting himself to 4 and having 11 points and 8 rebounds in this game. And 3 steals as well on 4 of 10 shooting. Ironically enough, before the game, and even still after the game, I was taking a look at something on NBA.com. There was a headline saying that Towns was still rounding out the very top of the MVP ladder for the NBA Finals, which I can understand why he'd be up there. But a game like this, if this continues on this trajectory, is probably not something that's going to be Finals MVP worthy, I should say. So you have to monitor that. OG Anunoby did step up big time, though, in Mikal Bridges' absence, along with the 4 fouls. Anunoby had 28 points on 9 of 13 shooting. Had an 11-point second quarter, shot 9 of 13 from the field, had 3 threes, had 5 rebounds, had 2 blocks. Like, he was everywhere in this game, and it still didn't prove to be enough for this Knicks team. It's an unfortunate game to waste, because as great as OG Anunoby is, like, his defense is so strong that at times you seem to gloss over the fact that he can actually put the ball in the basket at a high level. That is what has made this playoff run for OG Anunoby so vastly important to his reputation in a way. You know, everybody understood how good of a player Anunoby was, but now you have him showing at a high level that, hey, he can score with the best of them, and he can score efficiently with the best of them. And he's still doing the same thing, and you completely waste a performance like that, coming up just short. It's unfortunate. Josh Hart as well had 16 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists. So just a tough loss in a way for the Knicks this time around. But it was still close enough to where it's like it could have gone either way. And that's what you're going to get out of this entire series. So Game 4 later on tonight should be just as exciting for these teams. But the Knicks and Spurs have their own pairs of things that they will want to clean up. And maybe want to keep one driving home. That's always the strategic plan when it comes to playoff basketball. What do you stick with? What do you toss out the window? What do you work into the game that maybe they haven't seen before? Any number of things are on the table there. But for this game, This is the second NBA Finals ever with at least the first 3 games won on the road. So we've already had a series for quite some time now. It looks to get even better from here. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.